Welcome to Reach for Healing. I'm Rebecca, and I'm going to take this channel in a slightly different direction because I realized a few weeks ago that I'm actually in recovery from religious science. And if you don't know what religious science is, it is an organization that's dedicated to teaching spiritual metaphysics. There are two or three main organizations in the United States that are formed and organized officially and anoint ministers and practitioners: divine science, religious science, and to a lesser extent, but still related, unity. I say that I'm in recovery from religious science because over the last few years, I've realized that things just weren't as they were advertised. And I've spent a good deal of real estate on my blog, which is posted here in the information section here. I've written a lot about my concerns, starting with the fact that religious science was founded on some shady foundations. It was basically information stolen from divine science and repackaged in religious science. I believe that this was the brainchild of one Fenwick Holmes, who was in trouble with the United States government for securities fraud, and got out of that by the skin of his teeth, but had realized that people in religious circles will give money to a minister. So the next time he went after big sums of money from people, he made sure that there was a little more distance between him and the United States government by hiding behind that separation of church and state. And that is what I believe to be the foundation of religious science. And as anybody knows, when you build a house or a business or a tradition on a foundation that's shaky, you get what you get at the end of the road. So we're going to talk a little bit more about those foundations later. But tonight, what I want to do is provide the opposite party response, so to speak. When a president gives a State of the Union address, afterward, there is always a response from the party that the president is not a part of. So if it's a Democratic president, you're going to have a response or a rebuttal from a Republican member of Congress and vice versa. So tonight, I'm going to provide my response to Edward Viljoen's speech at the 2022 Centers for Spiritual Living Convention. And I believe that Edward Viljoen is the current spiritual leader of Centers for Spiritual Living. And I have to say, his 39-minute and 3-second talk was compelling and interesting and very easy to listen to. And I enjoyed listening to it. He made a lot of very salient points. In fact, he said a lot of the things that I've been saying on my blog, which is the way that Centers for Spiritual Living has been teaching prosperity is out of touch, that prosperity teachings and some of the related abundance teachings are very privileged based, that many of the teachings don't take into consideration the vast amounts of privilege that help some people put their attention on something and have it show up, while other people spend decades trying just to get up out of poverty. And it totally negates, or at least refuses to acknowledge, that there are institutional, environmental, cultural, and societal barriers that make it harder for some people than others. And so I give 5 stars for acknowledging that out loud and in public, that those things are problematic in the teaching. Something I've been really raising as a concern in my blog since 2014, asking about some of those practices that you don't give to charity, and that if somebody's poor, it's their fault. And the worst example of that, and I've written about this a few times, was a long-time practitioner that told me she would sooner give money to a rich person than a poor person. And I was always appalled by that. So I was very heartened to hear that the spiritual leader is addressing the fact that those things are issues. Now, I'm going to pause right here and say, any religious or spiritual tradition in 2022 that wants to be around in the 2030s knows they have to attract millennials. And millennials are all about authenticity, and they're not about inauthenticity. And there's nothing more inauthentic, in my opinion, than taking a bunch of privileged white people and having them be the front-facing representatives of how to manifest. Because when you are part of the privileged class in a society, it's real easy to manifest. And so millennials, I think, are over that kind of fantasy thinking, and they have no interest in it. And that's before we get into this whole idea of millennials in church. They don't want to go to church. They don't want to hear, they don't want some talking head telling them what to do. Millennials are very disinterested in someone who says, I'm the anointed leader. Even though my life's a mess, I'm going to tell you how to run your life and you're going to give me money to do it. That's dead in the water before it gets out the door. And that's, of course, the model in Centers for Spiritual Living, has been for a long time. Senior minister knows everything, and everybody should come and give all their money to the center, 10% of all their money, and pay the minister a salary, even if the minister's life's a hot mess and they can't even seem to take the principles that they want you to pay them to teach to you. They can't apply them in their own life and show you that the principles work. So, but that, again, that's another video talk for another day. I want to stay back on this issue of my rebuttal and response to Ed Viljoen's talk. The other thing that he brought up, again, a very good point, is that blaming people for the problems that show up in their life by asking them what was in your consciousness is wrong. And he's right that that's wrong. And he's right to call it out. And so I've gotten a couple nudges on social media from people who are still in the movement. They are still drinking the Kool-Aid, who say to me, see, things are changing. See, things are changing. A couple of them sent me links to this talk, which is how I saw it. And I simply have this to say. Number one, I like hearing that someone in leadership is recognizing and speaking out loud in public the truth about consciousness, victim blaming, spiritual shaming, spiritual bypass. Ed Viljoen mentioned spiritual bypass too, which is good. And this whole issue of privilege and how it impacts how we teach people in this movement, how they teach people. I was in this movement for a little over 10 years, so I still kind of slip into the we sometimes. He acknowledged these things out loud and publicly, and I applaud him for that. What I will be looking for is action. Because the cold, hard fact of the matter is that there are still a significant number of people in that movement who believe that consciousness is everything, who believe that if you're poor, you're attracting it to you. There are ministers out there that teach that if something's going on, you are attracting it, allowing it, promoting it, creating it, or stepping in. Sounds an awful lot like victim blaming. And so I will know that that message was more than just glad handing when I see some lines drawn in the sand. But I got to tell you, I'm a little suspicious. There's a lot of money attached to people that want to believe all that. And if you start drawing lines in the sand, people take their money and they go somewhere else. So my prediction is, as nice and as spot on and as necessary as that talk was, it will be little more than that talk. There will be no consequences for ministers who continue to teach that if you are experiencing something, you stepped in it, invited it, allowed it, tolerated it, promoted it. That teaching will still be going on. There will still be practitioners who are counseling people. They don't call it that, but that's what it is. There will still be practitioners counseling people about stepping in it, attracting things to them, vibrating. That's the one of the big ones that goes with one of the famous law of attraction folks. You're vibrating with something. That will continue to be taught. They will continue to allow law of attraction classes to be taught in centers, classes that are promoted and hosted by other non CSL or non-divine science people that are out in the public sphere, whose classes are popular. They will still allow those to be taught. And they will not, and I'm happy to be wrong about this, but I'm making a prediction. They will not draw that line in the sand and bring forth any consequences to ministers and practitioners and others who keep teaching the things that Ed Villian spoke out against today. And so, as heartened as we might want to be about what seemed to be a strong stance, actions speak louder than words. I'll be looking forward to seeing how all of this unfolds. Until next time, take care.